In our interview series for this year's election, we turn to the race for City Council in District 4, the seats being vacated by Andrea Campbell, and the district covers parts of Mattapan and Dorchester, along with adjacent areas in Rosendale and Jamaica Plain. Our guest is a former prosecutor, state representative, and more recently, the executive director of Boston's Human Rights Commission. We'd like to welcome Evandro Carvalho. Thank you very much for being with us, Evandro.
Thank you, Chris. It's always a pleasure to be with you. I think this is probably my 10th time over the years that I've been on the show with you. So I'm excited for another opportunity to share my vision of who I am and why I'm doing this with your viewing audience.
Evandro, when people hear that background, these different offices, a different focus in each one, maybe, what's the common denominator that you want people to see?
The common denominator is obvious, is that, I'm a man of the people, that I like to serve. What makes me happy is to serve others. I believe that, particularly having, gone from Madison Park High School to UMass Amherst, then to Howard University School of Law in Washington, D.C., which is an historically Black university. And if you look at the history of that school and what it means, and the folks like Thurgood Marshall, the first Supreme Court justice that was Black that entered in that school, that went to that school, folks that fought for civil rights movement, like Thurgood Marshall or Charles Hamilton Houston. And now obviously we have the vice president of the country, Kamala Harris, went to Howard. I think Howard really teaches people about serving and using your skills to serve others. And as someone who, came to the United States, to Dorchester, immigrated at age 15, but didn't know a lick of English. My mom worked 2-3 jobs just to feed us. So I understand how it is to struggle. And to be honest, as a young boy, didn't always make good decisions. And, in fact, was arrested at Madison Park at 17 years old. And a lot of my friends who I grew up with at the time, didn't make it, whether they were deported or killed, or certainly doing time in prison now. I feel that it's a mission in life for me to find ways to increase opportunities for others. Today, obviously, as you mentioned, I'm an attorney. Not only that, I work in City Hall as the head of the Human Rights Commission. I'm raising 2 beautiful daughters in District 4. I'm married to my best friend Ashley, who I met at Howard. And to be honest, I'll humbly say that I'm living the dream, right? The American dream that too often is evasive to our community. So I just use my skills in whatever capacity I can to help, if I can help others achieve their dreams and live their dreams. I live a happy life, which is why I continue to, whether it's an elected position or appointed position, I try to be in spaces where, as we say in law, public, I use my legal skills for public interest. You can do legal work in private sector, which I've done, for a few years, but most of my legal career has been in the public sector, doing things for the benefit of public interest. So this is just, to me, running for District 4, really, it's a continuation of my life's work of serving our community. So that's really what I want people to take away at the end of the day, that I'm a public servant and I love to serve people.
I want to ask you about becoming a success story after Madison Park, because that still sounds like a very unlikely thing these days. So what needs to change?
I think, honestly, a lot of it, it could be so many different things. But let's start at Madison Park, and let's start at Boston Public Schools, for instance, right? We know that as of late, for instance, the narrative has been around, duly so, around access to the exam schools in the city of Boston. And know, obviously, that just, I believe, last week or the week before, there was a complete revamp, if you will, of how admissions to those schools should include more students of color. But the narrative for me should also include what we do with schools like Madison Park, what we do with the other, what I say, other 99% of the students that attend Boston Public Schools. And I think, honestly, schools like Madison Park, which is such a jam, what it does is, it's great that people like me are able to go there and achieve, high education, but also that's not the only option, right? I want to change the narrative to say that when our students graduate from high school in the city of Boston, they have a skill, they have a trade, whether it's a union job that they can get a quality job in the city of Boston, or particularly now as we have the biotech industries, we have so many, certainly the hotel industry, the education industry, so many industries in the city of Boston, the greater Boston, that students can come out with an education that gives them actual skills. Like my brother, who's an electrician, never attended college and feeds his family. He has 3 beautiful girls himself. So I want to make sure that we focus on education that also train our kids real skills. So
Speaking of
that's number one.
Speaking of changing narratives, you were recently at the Lawn on D in the Seaport District. I think maybe you had a nice time, but at the same time, did that put any thoughts in your head about the untapped potential for economic empowerment for businesses owned by people of color in that part of the city?
I'm glad you brought that up, Chris. It was a great time, right? Family reunion, they called it. I think one of the things that Boston, the narrative in the city of Boston is, and to some extent, is rooted in facts. Is that there is no sort of cultural space and business space for people of color to grow. Right? There's not a lot of places that we can gather. As a family, as that event said. One of the things, for instance, that I think we can do more, particularly now that we have the American Rescue Plan funding that's coming into the city of Boston, is to make sure that we invest in small businesses, and that we, as unfortunately, again, the study showed not too long ago, that we increase the amount of spending that we do with small businesses that are businesses of color, and that we are intentional, that we figure out a way to not only lift up business that already exists, that is, to streamline some of the certainly things that we're doing now, but do more of, which is, certification, which is application process for funding or grants, or, permitting processes. Those things we need to do a better job of making them simpler, access to for businesses to get capital, to talk to our private sector. Certainly the banks are actually starting to step up more. We need to do more of those things. Another thing that, interesting enough, is just coming up that I actually worked on Beacon Hill. They didn't have much of a leg when I was there, but it seems like there may be a space for it now, is the happy hours, right? I'm not sure if you saw, Chris, there was a study recently that showed that, particularly coming out of COVID, a lot of folks throughout Massachusetts are now saying, okay, maybe we should have outdoor dining, maybe we should have drinks or food that are cheap at particular hours. And that's something that, I worked on with Mayor Walsh, actually, when I was a state rep. And again, it didn't have much leg, but what it does, it allows, businesses to be creative, right? Businesses to figure out a way to not only work on their prices, but get fun menus, fun drinks to get people coming into their businesses, right? Particularly restaurants that often in our community, are unfortunately are dying right now. So those are some of the things that we
talk
can do
about
better.
public safety problems. People who go to happy hour, they get behind the wheel and something bad happens. Are you worried about that? Maybe.
I am, obviously, as a former prosecutor, I always care about public safety. To me, certainly now, in terms of the two things that prioritize in my mind is health, public health safety, as well as safety of the, from us, from a, obviously a OUI standpoint, or certainly from a crime standpoint. But we do know, particularly in the city of Boston, man, we're known to be a bar space, right? A bar town, because we have a lot of bars. And obviously we have to continue to monitor and have safeguards, and certainly have training and substance abuse funded and training, mental health training for people. But I don't think, honestly, it would increase, the issue of people driving with, unfortunately, when they're not supposed to, right? But we can do education in this space. But really, when you look at the space that Boston already exists with so much bars up and down particularly our business districts, what it does, though, I'm thinking more particularly in District 4, right, where business. In fact, I was talking to, I don't know if this gentleman, he owns a and I'll be honest, actually, I don't know if he cares if I say it publicly, but I say what kind of business he has. He has a wings business in Grove Hall, and he wanted to open up later, right? Which is another part of this bill, which was to allow people to stay, allow business to stay up beyond 2 o'clock, for instance, right? Which a lot of cities throughout the country have. He talked about how he couldn't do it, and that diminished his business. In fact, he had to move because he couldn't afford. Initially, he was in JP, now is in Grove Hall, right? So I think there's when you make policy, we have to be bold, particularly in this time. But we also can think about safeguards that can help us with some of the unintended consequences of policies that we make.
One thing that people in this district are feeling more these days is the housing crunch, especially along the Fairmount Indigo corridor. What would you like to see, especially with the amount of units that are set aside by developers, is affordable housing?
Obviously, Chris, affordable housing is one of the most important issues that unfortunately the city has been facing, particularly over the past 10 years. And as someone who saw my mother early on struggle in the 90s to pay rent, and in fact, when she finally was able to save enough because she got a union job to buy a home, she couldn't buy it in the city of Boston, and bought a home in 2004 in Brockton. I still remember how proud she was when she saw me able to buy a triple decker in Dorchester when I did a few years ago. So I know that buying a home is critical to wealth building. But if you're talking about more affordable housing, rental property, one of the things that we need to do obviously is increase the IDP, the Inclusionary Development Program. Right now, the percentage that developers have to include in when they build housing in the city is 13%. We need to increase it to at least 20 to perhaps even more. I know Somerville and Cambridge has 20% now. So I think that's one of the critical things to do. The other thing that we need to do now, particularly again, going back to the ARP, that is the American Rescue Plan funding that's coming into the city of Boston. We need to make sure that we help our renters, particularly now, right, coming out of COVID-19, where individuals unfortunately lost their jobs. They can't afford to pay rent, so we need to continue to help in the renters fund that we have in the city of Boston. So to be honest, it's just a matter of allocation of resources at the end of the day, and we have a ton of money coming from the feds, so we need to focus there. And we also need to, I often, again, when we talk about affordable housing, Chris, I always end up at finding ways to help people actually buy their homes, because that's what's worked for me and my family. And I think, obviously, because rent is so high, that we can find ways to get people down payment help, which the city is doing now through programs like the One program, which they do in partnership with MAHA, which is Massachusetts Affordable Housing Alliance, which actually they help me. They're down the street from me on Fuller Street here. I'm on Fuller there on Dot Ave. They helped me buy my first home. There's a lot of funding coming in to help people with making sure that they get the adequate needs. Resources to buy their home. So I talk about affordable housing in rent space, but I always find a way to go into.
It's a big issue with many tentacles, to be sure. Thank you very much for taking the time to join us.
Thank you, Chris. Again, for the viewers that are watching, it's always a pleasure to be with Chris. Thank you, Chris, for your job. Continue serving and educating our people in the city of Boston. I want to say, ask one more time on September 14th, which is only 6 weeks away, that you consider me as your next District 4 City Council when you go vote. Evandro Carvalho. I'm day one ready to serve, because that's what I've been doing at least for the past 10 years, whether it's in City Hall or Beacon Hill, or helping nonprofits like MAHA, volunteering for them, talking to youth. I'm a man of the people. I'm a man of the community. I'd love to have your support to be your next District 4 City Council. Thank you, Chris.
Thank you very much for being with us, Evandro Carvalho, candidate for City Council in District 4. We'll have more news in just a moment.